Uh, Priya has been doing research on Gandhian economics in the Nehru Memorial Museum and Library for the last 2 years. She had already made one presentation on that subject. This is her second presentation on not just Gandhian economics, but Gandhi's social and economic ideas in general. The subject is so vast that I hope that Priya, keeps herself focused on some specific things, because as we know that Gandhi was the man who wrote at least 100 volumes of works which are now collected by the Navjivan Trust. And of course, probably a lot remains which has not been collected. And there was no important issue or subject with which Gandhi did not engage. The entire range of social and economic issues that one can think of was a subject of inquiry and engagement for Gandhi. That is, in some sense, a mark of the greatness of the man and of the immense contribution that he made to India and the world. We may or may not agree with many of his social and economic ideas, and one might recall that even during his own lifetime, many people disagreed with him. Of course, uh, they otherwise underscored the importance of Gandhi's leadership, but they may have agreed with his specific ideas either about economics or about society in general. However, those ideas remain relevant in some sense. Gandhian economics, especially, should not be seen as a set of quaint or outdated ideas, which I'm afraid sometimes it is seen. Now, there is an internal logic, I would say, to Gandhian economic ideas. Internal logic in the sense that if you accept a certain worldview of simplicity, a certain worldview in which society runs not so much after material growth as after other things, self improvement, etc., etc., these ideas in that context make perfect sense. How much importance they hold in a different kind of society, a modern industrialized society, is a subject that has been debated for almost 100 years now. And I'm sure that this debate is unlikely to be over anytime soon. But I do hope that Priya Bhalla's lecture will have some interesting ideas for us on the subject of Gandhi's socio-economic ideas. Since we are already running late, I will not take more of your time. But without any further delay, may I now request Dr. Priya Bhalla to make her presentation in the next 30 minutes. We are running late, so we'll cut down a bit.
Yeah, sure, sir.
Yes,
Thank you.
yeah. Please go ahead.
Yeah. So is my screen visible?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Thank you. Good afternoon to all connected with us today. Thank you all for taking time out to hear today's talk. Before I begin my presentation, I express my sincere gratitude to everyone at NMML for giving me the opportunity and support throughout the work, especially to the Deputy Director, Dr. Ravi Mishra, who has immense knowledge in this area. And these 2 years have been extremely satisfying and evolutionary for me. My presentation today is titled Encapsulating the Essence of Gandhi's Socio-Economic Ideas, Exploring the 6 E's, Leading Towards Inclusive Development, which is a part of my project on Gandhian economics in the past 2 years, wherein I have gained some understanding about Gandhi as Sir just introduced that there's ample to learn about him, and he's written on wide variety of issues. And this presentation is a sequel to my previous presentation on Principles of Economics and Gospel of Gandhian Economics, comparative analysis, which is available on YouTube. If you like or subscribe NMML, you can go to it. And it aimed to seek answers to some questions like, did Gandhi work as per the generally known economic principles, and how complementary and contradictory are Gospel of Gandhian economics and principles of economics? The innumerable socioeconomic problems inter India, hunger, starvation, malnutrition, poverty, inequality, and unemployment, have all heightened since the COVID 19 pandemic has struck the world. Particularly, the distress faced by the migrants and the daily wage laborers has been left bare open for us to see. At the same time, the clean air and the pure air and the spotting of wildlife in residential areas across the world has made us realize the ill effects and damage we have been causing in the process of attaining the limitless growth. Many voices from all age groups recently, and most notably of Greta Thunberg, have been raised against the dire and alarmist consequences. Yet, the resilience of economic system has been time and again put to test, and each time is being stretched to a newer hilt. But the question that haunts those concerned is, how long can the planet continue to bear this? Should we still continue on this mindless and heedless pursuit of growth? All these issues raise question on the future plausibility of commonly followed economic theories relating to growth and distribution. The answer to these problems, therefore, may not lie in blindly following the commonly adopted Western models and theories. It is time that the alternative voices that have been largely ignored till now need to be explored. Hence, it may be valuable to revisit Gandhian ideology, deeply suited for our economy but not given much place in the mainstream economics in India, providing ample scope for the study. In addition, Gandhi's insistence on localization and the need to provide a self-sufficient village economy finds resonance in the need to be Atmanirbhar in times of Corona. The objective is to decipher Gandhian economics and to integrate it with the literature in economics. A wide variety of data sources have been utilized. Most economies are still facing extreme inequalities that have shown a rising tendency. And a number of these studies, for instance, Piketty 2017, have emphasized this. Gandhi's concept of voluntary poverty and trusteeship that is directed towards more equitable and egalitarian social outcome have become more relevant than ever during these times. Gandhi, in his idea of self inflicted poverty, that is, voluntary poverty, was concerned with ensuring adequate food and clothing to the poor. However, the concept, definition, and measurement of poverty and inequality have evolved manifold since his times. A number of other questions have become more pertinent. Is poverty only food deprivation? Do poor ignore their own health? Is education, or rather the lack of it, responsible for the choices poor make? The academic discourse has reached to a much dense and complex terrain, from just ensuring that the poor get adequate to eat to ascertaining that they maintain required calories and micronutrients as per the standards, and further to intricately analyze the choices made by the poor. For instance, the Nobel Prize winners Abhijit Banerjee and Esther Duflo's book Poor Economics has been one such interesting and intriguing attempt to understanding poor and their behavior through surveys that are spread over the poor in the 18 countries, thereby trying to decipher why poor live the way they do. Moving on to Gandhi's economic ideology, the underlying assumption behind this is that of truth, morality, sacrifice, and non-violence. Many of these may be regarded as unrealistic, as are assumptions behind any economic theory or model. Nevertheless, we study these economic models. For instance, perfect competition is a market structure with a range of unrealistic assumptions such as identical products, price-taking firms, perfect knowledge, etc. Yet it is taught in all rudimentary courses of economics as it serves as the simplest and ideal market structure. It simply provides a benchmark against which the working of other market systems such as monopoly and oligopoly are compared. Next few minutes will be spent on evolution and relevance of Gandhi's economic ideology and the related literature. To the forefront of these stood J.C. Kumarappa, an agricultural economist who worked in constant touch with Gandhi and later brought brought forward his work Gandhian Economic Thought in 1951. Following this, a number of other attempts have discussed Gandhi's economic thoughts, which I have referred to in the study. A particular mention here may be made of A.K. Dasgupta, famous Indian economist and regarded as the father of modern economics in India. He argued that in order for the growth to actually have a dent on poverty and inequality, it was required that the real power should be in the hands of the masses. Accordingly, he recommended that the society should be organized so that the power flows from the bottom strata of the society to the top level rather than the other way around that it is currently working. Quotes begin, the doctrine of democratic decentralization, for this is what a bottom to top procedure of planning amounts to, is not new nor is it exotic. If the Chinese are supposed to be practicing it today, Gandhi preached it at least half a century ago. Can Gandhi be revived in the country where his philosophy originated? The prospect seems to be remote. To achieve this kind of decentralization, under which a system of community-based choice can find an expression in planning, is not an easy process. Who is it to bring it about? The possibility of a benign social order in which the so-called upper class would identify themselves with the masses has to be ruled out. We are too far away from the Gandhian ideal of trusteeship. Quotes close. In a similar tone, Polan Naik, the retired professor of economics from Delhi School of Economics, in his recent work in EPW, emphasizes the need to keep a check on the desire to attain higher growth, while considering the miserable plight of those exploited by the system, with the urgency to estimate and control the damage done to the nature. He succinctly states John Stuart Mill's stationary state and subtly compares his approach with the Gandhi's approach. In quotes, in Principles of Political Economy, published in 1848, Mill saw no point in going continuously for economic growth and dared to explicitly welcome a stationary state. Mill could also see the devastation that industrialization was causing to Mother Nature. Mill's stationary state is more likely to be consistent with a sustainable ecology as compared to anything that the growth fetishes may have to offer. This is also possibly where, coming from different directions, Mill and Gandhi and Mill intellectually meet. After discussing the literature briefly, I turn attention to the heart of the presentation, that is Gandhi's approach towards India's economic problems, and put forward his solutions and bring on their contemporary relevance. This is thus an attempt to crystallize Gandhi's economic ideology on the basis of the following 6 ends to be achieved. Employment, to be expanded by encouraging village and small-scale industries, particularly khadi. Emancipation of the poor, weak and vulnerable, living in deplorable conditions, to be overcome by adopting Gandhi's inclusive approach. Third, equality and egalitarianism, to be attained by practicing principles such as voluntary poverty and adopting trusteeship. Fourth, environment, to be protected for posterity by adopting austerity-based living and sustainable development practices. Fifth, ethics and morality in market society and economy at large, to be ensured by incorporating a moral dimension in the society. And sixth, education promotion with the objective of awakening and uplifting based on Gandhi's Nai Talim. The first key I would like to emphasize on is employment via the encouragement of the village and small-scale industries. Employment was certainly the most pressing concern that lies to the core of Gandhi's plan of action, be it in the promotion of khadi or in the propagation of charkha. Fast forward to today, the problem of large-scale poverty and unemployment, even after more than 70 years of independence, still intimidates economists, policymakers, and the common public. In fact, the threat looms much larger on us now, as India is already in the midst of rising supply of labor force, a consequence of the phase of the demographic dividend, which the country is currently passing through, and to add to it, COVID-19 has increased phenomenally to the unemployment woes. In those times, Gandhi particularly emphasized on the hand-based production as it resulted in massive employment. The production of khadi was sacred to him, so he worked with utmost sincerity and devotion for its revival and development. He writes about the origin and birth of khadi in his autobiography. According to Gandhi, the khadi revolution was also the means for achieving Swaraj, as it would result in reduction in poverty in the country. Not surprising, he believed the handloom or the spinning mill in quotes, to be a panacea for growing pauperism of India, quotes close. Gandhi asserted, quotes, I am concentrating my attention on the production of khadi. I swear by this form of Swadeshi because through it I can provide work to the semi-starved, semi-employed women of India. My idea was to get these women to spin yarn and to clothe the people of India with khadi woven out of it. The charkha or the spinning wheel, a highly simple and primitive tool and a metaphor of ahimsa, truth and non-violence, is pregnant with wider political and economic significance. There were several motives including charkha in the constructive program. The first was non-violence. In quotes, if you were to tell me that you have lost faith in non-violence as a means for the attainment of Swaraj, I would agree that the charkha or the constructive work have no use for you. It is my conviction that the phenomenal awakening that has taken place in India during the last 25 years is entirely due to the adoption of non-violence and the charkha as its symbol. Quotes close. But there were several other reasons too for Gandhi viewed each concept in a coherent manner. Quotes begin, the charkha has an undoubted value as a means for providing economic relief to the masses. But as I have so often reiterated, khadi activity, stripped of its significance in terms of India's independence, means nothing to me today. At the same time, if you take up the charkha work merely for gaining political ends, it will defeat its purpose and you will make a mess of it in the political as in economic sense. Quotes close. And the third reason was that when everyone, including the rich and the poor, the low and the high caste, would all come out and operate charkha together, multiple benefits were expected to emanate. The frail and feeble would add to their physical strength. The idle labor would gain employment. The social divisions in the community would narrow down. And all these together would create conducive conditions required for awakening the nation embarking on the freedom struggle. Putting in Gandhi's own words, quotes begin, it is a great thing to become industrious through the spinning wheel and give up lethargy. The key to a Swaraj lies in it. You must know that I talk about charkha only as regards India. I would not ply the charkha in the North Pole. Quotes close. So in the statement is contained the pertinent issue of choosing the appropriate technique for developing countries such as India. Das Gupta states, and rightly so, that in arguing that a labor-abundant society should adopt labor-intensive techniques, in quotes, Gandhi was ahead of economists of his time, quotes close. In this context, Dr. Zakir Hussain had outlined the economic reasoning for Gandhi's attachment to charkha, and he states in quotes, I don't think Gandhiji would have insisted on the spinning wheel for all time. Gandhiji came to the conclusion that this is the compulsory idleness of the people could be made use of for some productive work by means of instruments that would not cost much. Probably it would be of distinct economic help. With regard to the educated people, he insisted because he wanted them to identify themselves with the poor of the country. Quotes close. Essentially, the crux of Gandhian economics rests on employment, particularly with the intent towards a balanced regional development.
Subhash ji, is there a problem with connectivity?
मैडम की तरफ से कुछ वो नॉइज आ रहा है.
Sir, is this not clear? Hello, sir, am I not clear?
या अभी ठीक है. कुछ फैन वगैरह चल रहा है मैडम आपकी तरफ से?
फैन मैंने कम कर दिया. I just switch it on. So is it any better?
Yeah, yes ma'am.
Okay, I'll continue. So I was saying that essentially the crux of Gandhian economics rests on the employment, particularly with the intent towards balanced rural development. Apart from employment, he repeatedly expressed concern and worked for the cause of education, status of women, and sanitation in villages as expressed in various times in his own words. I'll present the quotes. Today, the sole occupation of women among us was supposed to be to bear children, cook for her husband, and otherwise drudge for the household. This was a shame. Not only was women condemned to domestic slavery, but when she went out as a laborer to earn wages, though she worked harder than the man, she was paid less. Quotes close. Another quote begins, I've heard the doctors say that everyone knows how to observe personal cleanliness up to a point. But our people do not seem to know the ABC of hygiene and sanitation. Quotes close. Another quote, village sanitation is a vital part of the village life and is as difficult as it is important. It needs a heroic effort to eradicate age-long insanitation. Quotes close. Further, in Indian agriculture, characterized by a large number of marginal and small size holdings, Gandhi encouraged the adoption of the cooperative model. In his own words, quotes, though articles may be manufactured by villagers in the cottages, they can be pooled together and profits divided. The villagers may work under the supervision and according to plan. If the will to cooperative effort is created, there is surely ample opportunity for cooperation, division of labor, saving of time, and efficiency of work. Quotes close. As a measure to boost efficiency, in quotes, in regard to agriculture, we must do our utmost to prevent further fragmentation of land and to encourage people to take up cooperative farming. Quotes close. And in his search for the right technique for agriculture, he states, again in quotes, there's nothing wrong in an engine plow in itself, and it may be a great advantage to a man who owns thousands of acres of land and has a cracked, cakey soil, which will not yield under the indigenous plow. What, however, we want is an implement that would suit owners of the small holdings from 1 acres to the 3 acres. Quotes end. So the concern for the marginal workers and marginal land holdings and the issue of appropriate technology is repeatedly seen in Gandhi's writings. And an interesting argument between the choice between the reed and fountain pen was published in Harijan in the 1937. In quotes, the rush and hurry of the town have no place in the village. The village dweller has not to work under high pressure or to speed about from place to place in motor cars and trams like the city dweller. All this work is done by the easier and more natural modes of locomotion. Similarly, the fountain pen can have no place in this economy. The introduction of the fountain pen in the village to me marks the beginning of the end of the existence of the village as such and its slow metamorphosis into the city. In a similar vein, Gandhi in 1927 writes on the evils of machine milling. Quotes begin, let not the reader also rush to the conclusion that the hand spinning movement is an indiscriminate onslaught upon machinery. This movement is intended to displace only such machinery worked by power as is harmful to the moral and material welfare of the starving millions. The fact is that we are too much obsessed by the glamour of the West. We forget that what may be perfectly good for certain conditions in the West is not necessarily good for the certain other, and often diametrically opposite conditions in the East. Quotes close. Thus, he believed that economics need to be developed according to a nation's requirement and resources, and not be blindly influenced by following other nations simply in order for the economic growth to be high. Further, there can be no denying the fact that agriculture in India may not be a very paying proposition, and farmers are mostly hard-pressed for finance, and even today with an elaborate network of commercial banks, regional rural banks, and cooperative banks, specially designed to meet the needs of the farmers, their life is often characterized by starvation, burdened by rising debts, and entrapped in the grip of borrowing, ultimately turning many farmers towards suicide. It is this system of village lending that baffles investigation. In this vein, Gandhi was attracted by the working of the Paisa Fund, a microfinance institution similar to the working of the Grameen Bank created to manage the small financial needs of the villagers. An extract. Quotes begin. Paisa Fund is a unique institution in India, if not in the world. Its creator, Sri Antaji D. Kale, is a poor man. 25 years ago, he conceived the idea of establishing what might be otherwise called a poor man's fund. for he meant literally to collect paisas, quarter annas, for the promotion of industries and thus help the poor. So all this is akin to the microfinance movement that enables judicious utilization of microfunds, working on the principles of economics of small and assuring safety nets to the poor, and providing the benefits of the informal and formal sources with a built-in collateral security in the system. Secondly, the empowerment of the weak, poor, and downtrodden. To emphasize on Gandhi's attempt to empower the weak, in this particular year, I discuss the constructive program, the Daridra Narayan approach, and inclusive development. In 1941, Gandhi outlines the constructive program as follows, in quotes, concretely expressed, constructive program means the universalization of hand spinning and khadi and popularization of village industries and village products. We recognize that effective spread of non-violence must bring communal harmony and complete eradication of untouchability in every shape and form. Quotes close. Essentially, the constructive program was a large-scale comprehensive reform program that initially included 13 items, and later in 1946, the list was enlarged to 18 reform measures. These include maintaining communal unity and harmony. Gandhi viewed this as first and foremost requirement for attaining Swaraj. And in quotes, without Hindu-Muslim unity, Hindu-Muslim, that is communal unity, we shall always remain crippled. And how can a crippled India win Swaraj? Quotes close. The second reform item is fighting untouchability. Gandhi considered untouchability, in quotes, blot and curse upon Hinduism, quotes close, and believed that a progressive India would be possible only if extreme discrimination and detestation widely prevalent in the society is removed. Quotes initiate, as long as the curse of untouchability pollutes the mind of the Hindu, so long is he himself an untouchable in the eyes of world, and an untouchable cannot win non-violent Swaraj. Quotes close. Third, prohibition of drugs and alcohol. Gandhi urged the medical professionals and congressmen to come forward and devise ways and means and special programs for this kind of a social and moral reform, and for assisting those in the grip of intoxication. Several benefits were expected to emanate, including the attainment of Swaraj, moral and ethical reform, as well as the diversion of money into more productive resources, resulting in better utilization of human resources and contributing to better health, education, and nutrition, particularly among children, preventing malnutrition in them and their stunted growth. All these combined had alarming effects on India's productivity and economic advancement, and hence the need for constructive program. Fourth, promoting khadi, which I've already spoken about. Fifth, encouraging other village industries. His commonly cited statement says it all, in quotes, the salvation of India is impossible without the salvation of villages, quotes close. Gandhi's approach is extremely simplistic when he recommends that each one of us should buy products made by village industries to fight pauperism, to fight starvation, and to fight idleness, which is widely rampant in Indian villages. All this is again resonating with the Atmanirbharta and the vocal for local expressed in present times. Maintaining village cleanliness and sanitation, Gandhi wished to see beautiful, sanitary, and refreshing villages, and not the filthy and smelly and insanitated ones. In quotes, if the majority of congressmen were derived from our villages, as they should be able to make our villages models of cleanliness in every sense of the word. A sense of national or social sanitation is not a virtue among us. I regard this defect as a great vice which is responsible for the disgraceful state of our villages and the sacred banks of the sacred rivers, and for diseases that spring from insanitation. Quotes close. And the cause for dismal state of Indian villages, according to Gandhi, is the divorce, in quotes, divorce between intelligence and labor that has resulted in criminal negligence of the villages. Quotes close. Next, new or basic education is the issue of education that has always occupied Gandhi's mind. In quotes, this education is meant to transform village children into model villagers. It is principally designed for them. The inspiration for it has come from villages. Quotes close. The issue of new education or Nai Talim, another E will be dealt a little later. Next, adult education. Keeping those times in perspective, Gandhi made best attempts to sensitize the villagers to understand the ills of the foreign rule and increase their awareness. as well as their self-confidence and how they could get rid of them. Woefully, this has been an ignored aspect and is still neglected today. Upliftment of women. A number of studies have emphasized the participation of women in Gandhi's mass movements such as Satyagraha and the transformative impact it had on their lives and on their families. In quotes, I have included the service of women in the constructive program, for though Satyagraha has automatically brought India's women out of their darkness, as nothing else could have in such an incredibly short space of time, Congressmen have not felt the call to see that women become equal partners in the fight for Swaraj. Quotes close. Gandhi's interest in experiments in dietetics, nutrition, and health are also well documented. He writes, in quotes, in a well-ordered society, the citizens know and observe the laws of health and hygiene. It is established beyond doubt that ignorance and neglect of the laws of health and hygiene are responsible for the majority of diseases to which mankind is heir. The very high death rate among us is no doubt largely due to our gnawing poverty, but it could also be mitigated if the people were properly educated about health and hygiene. These issues and many others make me wonder how relevant these words are in present times. Indeed, Gandhi was prescient. In 11 and 12 are the warning against embracing of English language by masses with a neglect for Indian language and culture. Provincial languages, cultivating love of one's own language, and propagation of national language were the next two important constituents of the constructive program. In quotes, our infatuation about English has made us unfaithful to the provincial languages. He will have equal regard for all the languages of India. Quotes close. Gandhi writes on economic equality. And while highlighting this, all this, he is highlighting the wide gulf of income between the rich and the poor. Gandhi was sure that such an inequitable social order would not last for long in free India once the poor realized their role and power. A revolution is
Priya, if I
bound.
may interrupt you
Yes,
for
sir.
a moment, we have 5 more minutes.
Okay, so I'll quickly take you through these. So Gandhi worked towards making people realize the strength of the collective power of union and through the use of simple tool of non-cooperation. And the next items concern Kisans, labor, Adivasi, and students, and for the upliftment of these. Gandhi's inclusive approach, almost all literary work in Gandhi's life have emphasized on his desire to work for the poor and deprived. And it is this Daridra Narayan approach and the inclusive approach, which are being emphasized in the next few slides, wherein he could see God in the poor. So his Mahadev Desai talks about face to face with the pauper, and herein he describes that how Gandhi could see God in the face of poor. So, inspired by Gandhi's philosophy of working for the weakest, many industrialists during the pre-independence period joined and began investing and working for social causes such as women empowerment, rural development, promotion of handmills, and abolishing untouchability. The third E, equality and egalitarianism, was emphasized by me just while discussing the constructive program. But Gandhi's concern for rising inequality made him recommend trusteeship as an indispensable principle, which could close or at least narrow the gulf between poor laborer and the rich capitalist. And importantly, Gandhi's concept of equality was not dividing the cake equally, but it was dividing according to each as per his needs. So, fast forward to present times, especially after 1991, as the state's role is dwindling, corporate social responsibility is now practiced by a number of enterprises. And it is being viewed by some as the modernized version of the trusteeship principle advocated by Gandhi. The next is the environment that contains economics of austerity and sustainable development arguments. A large number of naturalists regard Gandhi as one of the early thinkers in environmental issues. While modern day capitalism is all about rapid growth, mass machine-based production, and the idea of luxury consumption, minimalists such as Gandhi and a number of his followers such as A.K. Dasgupta believed in limiting our desires and adopting the idea of minimalist living. This school of thought has believed in principles of austerity and is against the idea of ostentatious consumption and the vulgar display of wealth. The fifth E, the ethics in market society and economy. Gandhi emphasizes about ethics in majority of his writings. And in recent times, the falling level of ethics in economics and finance has been raised by several authors and observers. In economics and ethics, the inseparable twins, as per Gandhi, Amartya Sen disturbingly brings out the widening disturbances between the two disciplines and pointing the fact that economics, in fact, originated as a branch of ethics. And the sixth is the education. Gandhi considered education to be immensely valuable, but he always regretted not being able to educate his own wife due to his devotion to public work. And he did not believe much in the school system, and therefore he initiated his own method of educating the children in his ashram. And Gandhi mentions about and quotes the rottenness of the education at various places. So, summing up my presentation, as the economies are facing the ill effects of higher inequalities and entering into greater international conflicts, border disputes, the trade wars, the climate change discussions, and other conflicts in the post-COVID-19 world order, terror and tension is all pervasive. Gandhi's thoughts on working for the poor and marginalized, the peace and non-violence, environment and sustainability have all become more relevant than ever before. So in the present study, an attempt has been made to revisit the ideas advocated by Gandhi and with a view to providing an examination and comparison with other views. And a number of policy recommendations follow. And the most relevant in the present times, again, is the need to provide suitable and dignified employment opportunities to the unemployed, both in the informal urban areas and in the rural areas, so that the surplus labor migrating to the urban areas, where they can find little organized sector employment and have to live in undignified, overcrowded, and unhygienic conditions, is checked. It is time that the schemes to provide full employment in rural areas be successfully worked on, where existing, and introduced where not. This was one of the Gandhi's dream. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Priya, for your very comprehensive lecture. We are now open to questions and comments from all the participants.
Yes, sir.
Hello.
Yes, yes. Please
Hello,
go
hello.
ahead. Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, yes, sir. I have a question.
Yes.
Actually, my name is Hemant Garg,
Okay.
and I am trainee of one year diploma course at National Archives of India, New Delhi.
Okay.
Then my question is regarding the constructive program of Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi. Particularly, I want to focus on three aspects, like which ma'am has discussed: maintaining communal harmony and unity, and second is fighting untouchability, and third is prohibition of drugs and alcohol. So my question regarding all these three aspects is that in the present context, in the present India, what we are facing, what we are seeing today, or my question communal unity and harmony related is that whatever is happened in February 2020 in Delhi riot particularly. So what we are really learning from the philosophy of Gandhiji in this case. And my second question is regarding the drugs and alcohol, like whatever is done by Delhi government in May month when COVID was on the.
Just a moment, just a moment, Mr. Hemant Garg. You see that the lecture is about history and about Gandhian economics and not about contemporary politics. So I would request you to sort of ask your questions in the context in which the lecture is located, rather than in the context of the present.
Yeah, I understand, sir. But my question, actually, I'm student of history, modern Indian history.
Yes.
So we
But
always
you are
read
asking
history.
question like a student of contemporary affairs. Yes.
But it's not different, sir. Because if we are not learning from history, if we are not learning from historical episode, then what is the use of history? That's why I'm
Yeah, this is
relating it from present context.
before this matter goes to Priya, let me try to answer your point that if we don't learn from history, what is the point of reading history? This is not the right approach in my opinion. History should be learned for many purposes. Learning from history may be one of the many purposes, but certainly it is not correct to say that if you cannot learn from history, there is no purpose in learning history. I think
But
that, that's an overstatement. Yes, go ahead.
but but I think my question was related more or less to Mr. Sorry, Gandhiji ideas and present politics. So it's I think not much different.
Okay, okay,
That's why
go
I
ahead.
asked.
I
That's
just
why I asked. Because what?
okay, okay, go ahead.
Yeah, because whatever is done in Delhi by Delhi government, I am no. I am just giving an example of Delhi. Like because I am living in Delhi, and in May month, whatever is done by Delhi government that to open the liquor shop in the during the corona epidemics, then is this policy of Delhi government was good for the health of people, for the health for the good health of Indians? So what Gandhi's philosophy in this case is applicable in India, or what government is applying his policy or his philosophy? My question is
See,
regarding
first
this.
of all, we must understand that even during Gandhi's lifetime, a very large number of people actually did not follow Gandhi. They had respect for Gandhi. They followed
Yeah.
Gandhi in the sense that they accepted his leadership, but they did not actually follow everything that he was preaching. For example, his views on prohibition, his views on vegetarianism, his views on brahmacharya, his views
Yeah.
on living a poor and simple life. So there are so many aspects of Gandhi's life which were there and which people admired, but they were, not followed by large number of people. There were, of course, some people who followed Gandhi's philosophy very closely. So one can say that,
But sir,
yeah,
at in the 21st century when technology is more advanced, so we should learn something from it also. We should like intellectuality of 21st century, postmodernism also here. So we can connect all these things.
yes, certainly, certainly. You see, two questions arise out of this. One question, of course, is that people may genuinely disagree with Gandhi. They may not want to follow Gandhi. So we should not assume, as you seem to be assuming, necessarily agrees with
Hello,
Gandhi.
hello.
Therefore, if they are not following Gandhi, no, that is necessarily a problem. That is first. Second is that even when people agree with Gandhi in theory, much of what he said, may be too difficult for them to follow. I mean, Gandhi was in some sense a hot potato, not easy for people to hold. So quite often people agree with Gandhi in theory, but when it comes to practice, they find it very, very difficult to follow him. Having said that, however, I understand the point you are trying to make, and that is that Gandhi being the greatest leader of modern India, I mean, the father of the nation, you are right in the sense that
Yeah.
there should be a genuine effort.
Actually, sorry. I'm sorry,
There
sir.
should be there should be
Excuse me.
there should be a genuine effort to there will be a genuine effort to incorporate as much of his teachings as possible. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah. First of all, I want to like quote the what you have said that Gandhi as father of nation. I'm not agree with this, but I think it's another
All
story.
right, you have
We should
had,
not go into it.
you have,
We should not go into
Himanshu,
it.
you have had your chance of asking questions. Let others ask now. Okay, thank you very much
Can
for
we
your.
have other questions? We can just ask
Okay.
others.
Thank you. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much.
Excuse me. I, I want to ask a
Yes,
question.
yes,
Yeah,
please go
please,
ahead.
Vishnu.
Yes. Myself, Dr. Vishnu Charanak, teaching economics in the Department of Economics, Motilal Nehru College, University of Delhi.
Yes,
And
please
my
go ahead.
question is that does this Atmanirbhar program declared by our Prime Minister has anything to do with the Gandhian economic thoughts? That's my question. Does the Atmanirbhar program declared by
That's
our
okay.
Prime
That's
Minister
okay. Yeah.
has
Fine.
Okay,
any,
please go ahead.
has anything to do with the
Yeah.
Gandhian economic thought. Yeah, that's my question.
Yeah. So can we have other questions also, or should I address them?
No, you can address right now. You can address.
Okay. Thank you all for keenly hearing and for your questions. Hemant Garg had talked about 3 specific items in the constructive program. I could just hear 2 because of the disturbance. One was communal harmony and the prohibition of drugs. The third was not clear to me. But his point, his argument that he was putting forward, amongst the various arguments that he was putting forward, one of them was that the liquor shops that have opened up in the during the corona epidemic and when the entire economy was under lockdown, and for the sole reason that it was for providing revenue to the government, was incorrect, morally incorrect and ethically incorrect as per what Gandhi talks about. So that's again, as Dr. Ravi Mishra just mentioned, that Gandhi was never followed earlier by all, but some of them did follow him. And even today, if Gandhi is going to, Gandhiji is going to come up and talk about this particular episode, he will regard this to be as totally unethical. And for him, there has to be an ethical and responsible mode of production. The revenue collection by the government, according to him, as I see, should also be ethical. And whenever there is a child labor, whenever there is earning revenue through liquor, is all incorrect. And he would regard ethics to be very important. And economics for him is ethical. If it is not ethical, it is not correct economics as per him. Regarding Vishnu's question that does this Atmanirbhar program has anything to do with Gandhian ideas? I feel that this program, as currently we are seeing, is due to different reasons. We know that it is induced because of the corona epidemic and because the economy has received a setback. And the employment has been a big concern for for not just India, but for all nations across. So in this particular period, the Atmanirbhar the inducing factors are different. Then the inducing factors, when we talked about the Swadeshi movement, were different. They were propelled by the desire to achieve independence and to drive out the Britishers. So the idea is the same, that we are looking inwards in both the cases, but the propelling factors are different in both these. That's what my understanding here is.
Any other question?
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Is there any other question, or we close?
Thank you, ma'am, for response.
All right. I think there is no other question. So thank you very much, Priya, for your very interesting and comprehensive lecture. I just wish that you had focused a bit more on Gandhian economics. You have taken a very broad canvas, and that has some meaning certainly. But in the process, it has become a bit sort of too vast a canvas. But anyway, I understand that in the last lecture you had you had been more focused, and this time you wanted to sort of
right. I wanted to summarize and wrap up.
I understand. I understand, but when you publish it in the form of a paper, I hope that you can be more focused on a few specific things, because 6 seem to be too difficult to probably in a man like Gandhi to include in the course of a single lecture or a paper. But I highly appreciate your interesting and comprehensive lecture, and I'm sure all the participants have enjoyed it very much. I thank all the participants, and I thank Dr. Priya Bhalla, our fellow, for being present this afternoon.
Thank you so much, sir, for your valuable inputs, and best of health to all of you. Thank you.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Thank you, ma'am.